Hey guys, welcome back. It's Ripe again, back with more relationship stories. In this video, my smug cheating wife demanded I give her my house because she got pregnant from an affair. Let's dive right into the video. This story is gonna be long, so I will try to break it up the best I can into three main pieces of how things happened. So the first part will be about my marriage. My wife and I were a pair that was destined to fail to be together from the beginning. We got married at 23 years old after I found out that she was pregnant. I grew up with the mentality of doing the right thing, so once I found out she was having my baby, I married her despite not feeling ready and not being with her for even 2 years at that point. What I didn't know until years later was when we lost the baby after we got married, it was a lie and there was actually never a baby. But I thought there was a grief with her as she knew the truth and we continued our lives together. I worked longer hours to stay out of the house and she took long weekend trips with her friends. The love was dying and it pretty much died totally once she confessed that there was never a baby and the entire basis of our marriage was a lie. She wanted to make sure she kept me and I would not leave her, so that is why she did it, trying to make it sound romantic or something instead of horrible. We had a big fight but still stayed together as at this point we were just both too stubborn about things. I was in a loveless marriage and I just kind of let myself feel apathetic about it. There were good moments, especially at the beginning, when we both still loved each other. It was not all miserable, it was just that the miserable parts seemed to be what stick out the most in my mind at least. Well, this continued for about 6 years until my wife started to act very strangely. She was having hushed conversations in the house and hanging up phone calls when I would walk into the room. I would question it and she would just tell me that I was being paranoid. I knew it was something more than that and I dug deeper to find out what it was. And well, it turns out that another secret had been she was cheating on me essentially the entire marriage. The marriage, by the way, that she wanted so badly that she lied about a pregnancy in order to make happen. For reasons that I will get into later, but basically it all related back to money, as so many things in this world do. I guess she decided that being sneaky about cheating was not important anymore with how obvious she was being about it. About a month later I got some news that would basically change everything, and that was when things would really start to get interesting. My wife said, "I need to talk to you about something important." Me, "What is it? Are you okay?" Wife, "I'm pregnant. We are going to have a baby." Me, "What do you mean we?" Wife, "It is your son or daughter. After all this time it finally happened." Me, "How far along are you?" Wife, "Why does that matter?" Me, "Just tell me." Wife, "About 3 months." Me, "We have not been together in about 6 months. So how are you going to come up to me and lie again? You know damn well that if you're pregnant, it is not mine." Wife, "Who else can it be?" Me, "Well, maybe one of the guys that you've been actually sleeping with." Find out which and tell him the good news. Wife, "You're my husband. That means it's going to be your son or daughter." Me, "No, I'm not the father and soon I won't be your husband. I'm done with this, I'm just done." This leads into part 2, which I will call the divorce stage. So once I learned about the baby, I was just done and it was the push that I needed to file for a divorce. In the meantime, I didn't want anything to do with her and she started to show a new side of her personality that I never really seen before. A smug and entitled side where she assumed that because she was pregnant it meant that she was gonna get everything she wanted no matter what. She started making crazy demands of me that I was not gonna do despite the fact that we were married. First of all, she wanted me involved with the pregnancy and baby, which I told her was not gonna happen. I told her to find the father and let him deal with it, but I honestly would not have been surprised to hear that she did not know who the father actually was. She had been sleeping around and cheating that much. She started demanding that I stay home from work or get her some help around the house because she could not do anything. She was barely showing at this point and didn't appear to be in any distress. She just figured it was an overall excuse that she could use and I was not falling for it. I told her to take care of herself and remember to get a lawyer because I already had one. Finally though, she tried to guilt me during the entire process, saying that the stress that I was causing her with the divorce could cause her to lose the baby again. She said again, as if the time she faked it actually happened, and tried to tug on my heartstrings from that. Bringing up the emotions because to me it was real and thinking she could manipulate me that way. I told my lawyer about everything and we went through papers to find everything out. I had a piece of paper that she had signed, probably without reading it. It was a prenuptial agreement, meaning that if we got divorced, she was not gonna get any of my money or my property that was in my sole name before the marriage. Things we got together during the marriage would be on the table for her to try and get half of, but I also had a strategy for that. So since I got married under the false pretense of thinking she was pregnant and the fact that she'd been cheating on me, I had the papers delivered to her despite us living in the same house, and she threw a fit. She started acting like she was on one of the Real Housewives shows where the women just go nuts out of nowhere for the cameras and the drama of everything. Shows that she commonly watched, which is where I'm guessing she learned this behavior from. Only there were no cameras or anything, it was just her losing her mind on me. Again, saying the stress would hurt the baby and that she would have me arrested if anything was wrong with it. And yes, I know stress is bad for pregnancy, but I think she was the one stressing herself out by having these meltdowns. And I knew they were fake because 5 minutes later she would be totally fine and acting like it never happened. Just a light switch going on and off randomly during this entire fiasco. Finally, it came time to sit down with lawyers and a mediator to talk about how things were going to happen with our assets. She walked in with a list of demands of things that she wanted and reasons that she should have it, the biggest and most important being that she felt she should have the house, making a point that she needed it in order to raise our child properly, and that she had taken care of it for so many years that she was entitled to it anyway. Stating that I would be fine in a small apartment and that in exchange she might consider allowing me visitation to the kid. My lawyer shut it down right away, pointing out that the prenup that she seemed to have been ignoring. She even asked what it was, and when her lawyer explained, she had another one of her meltdowns, claiming it was not real and I had tried to trick her with this. Her lawyer had to sit her down and explain to her that it was already set in stone and she couldn't do anything about it. I decided to tell her in front of the lawyers that if she had a paternity test that showed the kid was mine, I would let her have the house. And well, she for some reason agreed to do the test, which proved I was not the father and ended up helping me with other things down the line. She was also not gonna get any of my money, which she really thought she would get half of. Wife: I have a right to that money. I married him and we took vows saying that what is mine is yours. Lawyer: that only applies while you remain married. Wife: then I want to remain married on paper. We can live separately. She didn't understand that the entire thing was not up to her and that being pregnant didn't mean she controlled everything. My lawyer kept looking at me like he was curious how I stayed married to her for this long. I could only shrug back at him, wondering if this was always how she was and I was just blinded or ignoring it for all this time. She started getting her family to harass me as well, saying that I was a horrible husband leaving my pregnant wife. Just blowing up my phone to tell me that I was an awful person, and so many texts that I was debating getting restraining orders or a new phone or something to make it all stop. Finally telling her that I was keeping it all as evidence in the divorce, and suddenly it all stopped. She ended up not getting anything in the divorce but still did not want to leave the house. So she was eventually forced by police to leave, and at that point she was showing and very pregnant, so I looked like a total a-hole. Then the last thing she did for this part of the story is when she went into labor and actually had her son. She called me on the phone from an unknown number and I answered to find out that it was her. She wanted me to come down there and sign the birth certificate. Sign for the child that we both knew was not mine. Probably because she wanted child support money or not to look bad at having no man sign the certificate. I hung up the phone and ignored future calls by her. Eventually, some nurse called to tell me that my child was born, only for me to explain that it was not mine and to stop calling me. My ex-wife was getting crazier by the day and it really shouldn't have been my problem anymore, yet I'm going into a third and final section of the story to explain what happened with her after the divorce was finalized and she was meant to be out of my life. Staying away from me was not something she understood, as she kept showing up wanting money or for me to claim the child. Things escalated when she slashed my tires and I called the police and got a restraining order against her. She was not allowed near me anymore and she was really trying to turn the story into me being the horrible person. She was telling her family and even our mutual friends that I left her with our baby and no home or anything. Some friends listened to my side and understood, while others believed her and just blocked me on everything, deciding that I was a horrible man who abandoned his family. I got an interesting call from her mother one day, begging me to take her back and just raise the kid as my own anyway, claiming that she loved me and she was lost without me. I told her mother the entire story and it turns out that she knew the truth and admitted that her daughter had a lot of problems. but at the same time did not know what to do with her and wanted me to help. She was a nice lady, but I told her that I was done and I didn't want to speak or hear from my ex-wife again. It turns out that her family didn't want to put her and the baby up either, and she was jumping from shelter to shelter, getting kicked out of them for starting fights and other problems. I've no idea how CPS didn't come in and try to take her son away from her yet. With the things I heard she had been getting up to, she was begging on the streets, and my guess was trying to track down who the actual father was in order to get some help. I also heard from her for the last time months ago, saying that she was filing a lawsuit against me for ruining her entire life, offering to keep it out of court if I settled and gave her money and rented her an apartment. I told her that I was done helping her and to stop trying to contact me, or I would call the police on her because I had a restraining order, and that seemed to be the end of things. But she was smug until the very end, thinking that she was truly entitled to things because she had tricked me into getting married to her. So yeah, I'm significantly happier without her in my life, and my only regret was not leaving her sooner. Some of you reading this might even think that I'm in the wrong for leaving her when and how I did. I just know it was good for me, and I will never be sorry for that. And honestly, Ripe Stars, who in their right mind would think that OP was in the wrong here? Seriously, sometimes Reddit can be crazy. Anyway, the next one is a malicious compliance story. So I worked at a company that had a lot of people that had worked a long time there. It was pretty common for new chemistry or chemical engineering grads to come in as their first job after college. At 20 years they got 6 weeks, 30 days of vacation. Some people liked to work and simply rolled vacation days into the next year. The maximum you could ever carry over was 45 days. At some point some bean counter figured out that the 45 days were a liability to the company. If you are selling a chunk of a company off and those people have 6 weeks of vacation and another 9 weeks in the bank, well, that is 15 weeks of time that the new owner could be on the hook for. So they decided and put out a proclamation that there would be no carryover from one year to the next. Much unhappiness swept the company. Lots of people tried to plan how they were gonna use it. One of the key people I worked with came up in October and said that they are going on vacation and how much they liked working with me, which was kind of odd, so I pressed a little on why this sounded like a forever goodbye and not a see you in a week. So then I got told under strict confidence that they had found a new job and the new job started in 2 weeks. They had enough vacation days to cover them to January 1st, and the next year's vacation and holidays covered the first 2 months of the following year. So they were done, I wished them well, and they were gone. But they were not as good as I am in keeping secrets. There were suddenly a number of key people also with 6 weeks vacation and large vacation bank that were gone. Lots of unhappy people in HR. HR could not say no to the closeout vacation since they had decreed the rollover freeze. Also, HR decreed, you must return to work to be able to collect the vacation in the next year. And it turns out, most of the people got jobs in very cool companies. They all scheduled a vacation day so they could come back to work for a day. They came back en masse, co-workers scheduled them all into meetings, so they had things to do on the day. It was mostly a party day with an all-day food fest. As an added bonus, senior management had indeed planned to split off a division and the sale fell through because of all the people that had bailed out. The next one is titled Epic Petty Revenge. The other day I was hanging out with a neighbor friend. We were complaining about other parents, co-workers, other neighbors, and the ways we only wish we could get petty revenge on them. You know, things like X likes brownies, constantly readjusting their chair, stealing their pen, etc. Neighbor's husband NH overheard us and got really excited about a petty revenge he executed a few weeks ago and gave my permission to post his story here. NH works at some sort of global logistics company. Due to the nature of their work, only one person can be on vacation at a time, first come first serve. There's only about 20 people in his division, so it is usually not a problem. Only a small number of them have kids, so it is a bit of an unwritten rule to give priority to those with kids. Obviously, it's not enforced, but as I said, most of them don't have kids. Most of his co-workers don't mind taking their vacation January to February and September to October. But of course, there's always that one person that does not give two craps about anyone else. We will call her Shelly. NH said he swears she goes out of her way to schedule her vacation and days off when kids are out of school. NH's grandfather turns 93 this year, and like most people that age, his health is not the greatest. For spring break this year, he wanted to go out of town and visit him for what could be the last time. At the beginning of the year, he put in the request for that week off, but gets denied because Shelley had put in for that time off a few days prior. NH knows he's pretty much SOL, but he reaches out to HR and asks if he could offer to give Shelley some of his PTO in exchange for this week. Shelley responds back to HR nastily, "It is my vacation time. First come, first serve. There's nothing on this earth that will stop me from using my PTO." Fine, fair is fair. He then planned for his wife and kids to visit his grandfather without him. But leading up to spring break, NH was getting more and more annoyed with Shelley. She was constantly bragging about the cruise she had planned, what she and her boyfriend planned to do, how expensive this cruise would be because of which cruise line they were taking, and how they had a fancy room. She talked about it every single day whenever NH was within earshot, just to rub salt in the wound. If you don't know, a lot of cruise lines require a COVID test 48 hours in advance. If you're positive, no cruise for you. Surprise, surprise, Shelley tests positive. She asked HR if she could change her PTO to sick leave, but all HR did was throw her words back at her. "Sorry, you told us that there was nothing on earth that would stop you from using your PTO." The icing on the cake, because she had talked so extensively about this cruise, NH knew pretty much everything about this trip. A couple weeks before Shelley was expected to leave, he looked up the dates this cruise line would be sailing out for the rest of the year and scheduled a couple days off in the middle of each cruise trip. When I asked him why, he laughed and said he hated feeling so helpless and he was mad, and this was the only thing he could think of to do out of spite that won't get him in trouble. So when Shelley came back from quarantine, she had tried to put in another PTO requests to make up the cruise, but of course she was denied because NH had put in for the dates before her. She tried to approach him about it, but all he said was, "Sorry, first come, first serve." I would like to say she learned some sort of lesson from all this, however, NH says she hasn't. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. A little over a year ago, my husband and I found the cutest property close to all of our friends' favorite hangout bars and restaurants. It is located in a neighborhood close to this recently blossoming part of the city, and we got it for a steal. My mother always taught me to use manners and introduce myself to the neighbors. Our neighbors to the west were another young couple enjoying the up-and-coming area, and we clicked with them right away. Then we met our neighbor to the east named Julie. She is a little older than us and a single woman. She seemed really sweet and I had no issues with her at all. Although she did mention something to me fleetingly as we parted ways. She said something to the effect of, "Just make sure to talk to me before doing any work to my side yard." I'll admit, I thought it was strange but decided to let it go, but the more I thought about it, the more confused I was. Her side yard was a very small portion of grass which was close to 5 feet across, and the rest was ours, a little over twice that much. When looking at the front of the house, our driveway extended into the area that she called her side yard, but it stopped when you approached the backyard where there was grass. Our backyards were obviously adjacent to hers, and she had to walk onto our side of the property in order to access her backyard. We did not mind this, she would have to rebuild her fence and gate in order to change it. We did not see any reason to fight with Julie about it at the time and thought that we would let things pass as long as she was respectful. This was unfortunately a mistake on our part because a lawyer friend pointed out later that she was likely going to keep this up long enough to document herself using our yard so that she could steal the property from underneath us. Something called adverse possession. Things were okay for a while until we decided to have the driveway paved. Before, it was some old push-down gravel and some grass, but we wanted to have a nicely paved driveway. This meant that we had to have the property marked for the concrete. I wanted to be certain of the property lines, so I hired a surveyor to clearly identify and mark what was our land and what was Julie's. Just as we suspected, we were correct. Julie's property was a little less than 5 feet and the rest was ours. The day the concrete crew came was truly a beautiful May morning. I was enjoying my tea in my new sundress and was idly observing the guys setting up to lay the concrete when I heard Julie come marching out of her front door. She skirted around the crew and walked up to me on the porch swing. "What do you think you're doing with my side yard?" Her face was flushed and her brow was pinched into a scowl. She stood with her hands on her hips and looked up at me over the porch railing. I mimicked her stance and said calmly, "It's actually mostly my yard, and I wanted to pave my driveway. I had a surveyor come out and tell me exactly what is mine and what is yours, so there should be no issues." Surprisingly, instead of her getting angry, she seemed to settle down. "Oh, I see. Well, all you had to do was talk to me, you know. That is all I ask." While she had calmed down, I still did not trust it. She had a mischievous look in her eye as she turned around to leave. Things seemed to return to cordial times for about a month, and I began to lose my suspicion that she was up to something. Until one day, my husband and I both return home from work to find our driveway taken over by a silly-looking landscaping wall. To fit in the driveway, we had to put our driver's side tires all the way into our yard, which was sloped and awkward to maneuver safely. It's a good thing we did not have passengers because they would have had to crawl across to the other side to get out. My husband was fuming and I was pissed too, but I knew that this would not end up being an issue at all. We are easily within our legal right to destroy her landscaping wall, and I might even put up my own fence to make it even worse for her. We did not even have to go over to her place to confront her, as she was already patiently waiting outside, probably trying to record our reactions. I walked around the fence and nearly ran into her, demanding that she tell me why she did this, to which she just smiled and said that she thought it looked nice. "It is not even on your property." My husband was pissed. "Oh, it's not? My other neighbor and I used to share the side yard and they didn't have an issue." "It is right where we just had the driveway paved. It's literally on the concrete." She continued to feign ignorance and act as if she did not know that this would cause a problem. "Please have it taken down." I was proud of my husband for staying strong and not snapping too badly at our older neighbor. I cannot help but not get too upset since she acts as if she is sort of clueless, but I agree with hubby, it just seems suspicious. A few days later, Julie had the landscaping wall removed, but it did take me another time to ask her, by myself, before she went ahead with it, grumbling under her breath about how we were going to ruin the neighborhood's character or some crap like that. Again, a few weeks passed and only some subtle annoying things were happening with Julie. Like, she put her trash cans and blocked over half of our driveway, so my husband had to move them to leave for work in the morning. That happened a few weeks in a row, but she eventually stopped. Then she started letting her two little fluffy dogs poop in the infamous side yard, causing my husband to hilariously slip and fall on a fresh turd one foggy cold morning. Yeah, I felt bad for laughing, but come on, that's one of those things you cannot help but tease your spouse about for a while. At that point, the husband has had enough of Julie and her little dog's poop, literally. He hired a fencing crew to come out and build a huge privacy fence even further over than the driveway was. Don't worry though, we are still on our property. My husband called it the spite fence and he relished every moment of it being built. Sometimes he was even sitting on the porch swing and watching them as the view of Julie's house got smaller and smaller. I did not realize until it was completely finished that he had even paid for them to build the fence all the way to the backyard. This ended up cutting off her access to her yard, and well, technically she could get to her fence, but it was really a tight squeeze and she was not a small woman, plus the door could not open all the way now either. She ended up kicking the fence and screaming at us through it, saying that she would sue us for this and she would get the property line reduced just as a screw you. Well, needless to say, that did not work. She tried to sue us, kind of. She started the process and had a lawyer, allegedly, and even sent paperwork to our door, only for the case to be dismissed before it even made it to a courtroom. I will say that the spite fence may be a bit of an eyesore and I'm not its biggest fan, and I know that some of the other neighbors think that it was a little unnecessary, but it at least keeps someone from trying to steal our property. Plus, it makes my husband feel better. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you ever had a neighbor that tried to steal your property or built ridiculous landscaping walls right next to your property or even on your property, what would you have done if you were in OP's shoes? Let us know in the comments. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.